Hello, so today's video is all about the Canon 24-105 f4L classic lens. Now, I've been using this for a while and I just thought I'd give you some of my thoughts and opinions from the perspective of a professional photographer that's been using Canon equipment for nearly 30 years. To begin with, I'll just show you some of the pictures that I've taken with it so you can get an idea of the wide variety of subjects and things that I've shot with this lens. So just to begin with, a little bit of history that I didn't actually buy this lens from new. This lens was left to me by one of my really best friends who sadly passed away a few years ago. And it kind of coincided, it arrived into my hands at roughly the same time that my old standard zoom, which was a 24-70 f2.8, which I'd used for about a decade quite successfully, really liked that lens. Sadly, an airline cracked it open for me and so it died. Roughly at the same time that this arrived. So the very next assignment that I had, I picked this lens up, and going back even further, I'd actually written the 24-105 off about 12 or 13 years ago, something like that, when I bought my original 24-70 f2.8, because at that time I was using some of the first Canon full frame digital SLRs. I'd had a few problems with some sort of front focus and back focus issues that those cameras had. And so when I needed a new standard zoom, I actually went into a camera store and I got the guys to take all of the lenses out of their boxes and took my laptop and actually tried all of the different lenses out on the camera to see which would give me the sharpest results. And on that occasion, I couldn't find a 24-105 that was actually really sharp, and so I went for the 24-70. Now, over the years, I've heard lots of different stories about this lens, and I've come to the conclusion that there may have been a little bit of variation in the build quality. So what I'm trying to say is there may have been some good ones and there may have been some bad ones, and maybe some in the middle. Maybe that was to do with the compatibility with the camera or calibrating to the camera, who knows? But there seems to be sort of differing results, if you like. And there was a lot of these made. There's, so I guess if there is a lens that's going to have some variation, maybe it's kind of the ones where there's the most produced. So at that time, I wrote the 24-105 off because I couldn't find a version that was as sharp as the 24-70. So when this came into my hands, I was kind of ready to be disappointed again. However, the first assignment that I shot with it, I was quite surprised by the sharpness and the extra length of the 105mm, really felt quite special. And so, to talk about the good and the bad sides of the lenses, it's sharp. This particular lens, everyone will have different versions of this. This particular lens on my Canon 5D Mark IV and Mark III is sharp all the way through from 24-105. No issues at all from the centre to the edge with sharpness on this particular lens. There is a bit of barrel distortion on the wide end, which can be a pain. It looks pretty bad out of the camera, but it can be rectified quite simply in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw just by applying a profile correction. However, if you're just sort of shooting straight at the camera, it can look a little bit bad and looks a little bit kind of barreled, kind of it curves the edges a little bit, which can look a bit ugly. Also, a thing that I dislike about this lens, this is going to be a yin and a yang, okay? So one of the things I dislike about it is it has this awful tendency to have zoom creep, which if you're walking around, let's say you've been shooting at 24mm and you're walking around with it, and then you kind of put it over your shoulder, the lens will kind of creep its way out to roughly, it seems to be at about 80mm. And when you pick the camera up again to take a picture, it's zoomed in. It's a huge pain in the backside. Now, I know that people have worked out some fixes, different ways of stopping that from happening. And the newer lens actually has a lock on it, I think. But none of those are kind of good for me. I just want it, ideally I want it not to creep. But maybe, you know, this is an old battered lens. I mean, look at this lens hood, it's sort of held together with gaffer tape. It's been around the block a few times, and maybe that's why it's got the zoom creep, because it's a bit worn out. Maybe the newer versions don't do it, I don't know. But I have heard lots of other people talking about that as well. The best thing about the lens is just it's such a great focal length. You know, 24 to 105, it means it's the only lens that I've got that I could probably shoot every single assignment on if I had to. It's wide enough to shoot interiors and wide angle stuff, and it's long enough at 105 for portraiture and everything in between. And it has image stabilization, which is very cool. A lot of people moan that it's f4, not f2.8, and I can see that. However, modern cameras and their high ISO capability have removed the necessity for f2.8 or brighter a lot of the time, because we can just ramp our ISO up. And f4 is enough to give, you know, if you use it intelligently, you can still get out of focus backgrounds. And, you know, a 24 to 105 or a standard zoom, and this is actually kind of sort of going away from a standard zoom almost to a super zoom, because a standard zoom typically was 28 to 70, and the 24 to 105 means it's that little bit wider, which is really cool, and it's that little bit longer at 105, which again is really cool. Now, they're always going to be a compromise. It's always going to be a compromise. It's never going to be the sharpest lens in the world as compared to a prime lens. And it's always going to be a bit of a compromise. And so that's where the yin and the yang comes in. You have to make up your own mind. But certainly in terms of a lens that can do absolutely everything well and produce sharp images, this lens is certainly very good. Now, the word compromise, I've written down the word compromise a lot, because it is a compromise. You're going to have to, you know, ideally we would all have the perfect prime lens on our camera at any given point for any given perfect picture that you wish to take, and we'd have time to work out exactly all of our settings and to set everything up perfectly. But life isn't like that. And sometimes having the flexibility of this lens is just extraordinary, but it is a compromise. And, you know, ideally, if I was shooting something at the 50mm focal length, I'd rather have a 50mm prime, honestly, and have the option to, you know, throw the background a little bit more out of focus and work with the sharpness of that lens. But this is, you know, more than good enough, and I've used it loads. I surprise myself how often I find it on my camera. And I suppose that's, you know, when I talk about compromise as well, this is a lens that I use all of the time. It's a workhorse, it's a utility lens. It gets everything done really well. And yet I don't really love it. I love it because it was left to me by one of my best friends, but I don't, as a focal length, I don't really love it. And I've always felt like that about the medium standard zoom. I've always felt like the compromise is, you know, it sort of softens the creative effect, I suppose. But so there's the yin and the yang for you. Compromise. It's a great lens. If you only had to choose one lens, it would be the one lens that you could shoot everything on. And, you know, the other day I went out and I was shooting a day in the life of a farmer. And this is interesting because it's kind of, you know, I found myself, you know, I'm in a little bit of a position at the moment where I'm sort of thinking, should I be going mirrorless? Should I be going for some smaller bodies? Should I be kind of sticking with the DSLRs? You know, should I be pursuing newer technology? And it was only on this shoot where I was in a milking parlour and there's cows everywhere and it's busy and people were trying to socially distance, but it was, you know, it was just kind of a chaotic environment, and I was trying to shoot these sort of unposed reportage style pictures, and I had two Canon cameras on my shoulders and a lens pouch, and, you know, in those circumstances with cow urine dripping off of your cameras, you're kind of quite glad that you've got a couple of sturdy DSLRs with you and even gladder that you've got maybe the 24 to 105, because you can kind of do that wide angle shot of the milking parlour, and then as one of the sort of milking team turn around and the light's nice on their face, you can zoom in and bang bang bang, you've got your portraits. You know, it's a really lovely compromise lens like that, and it's so utilitarian that it kind of gives you everything that you need. And really, there's not many other ways. You could have two cameras with two different, you know, with maybe a 105 prime or a 90mm prime, and then a 24mm wide on another camera, and you could kind of work like that. That would work really well. That's another way of doing it. But, you know, in terms of a camera that, a lens that really kind of gets the goods really quickly, this is this is a great great lens. And in terms of value, you know, you can buy these things for, I think, £400, probably $400-ish, give or take a bit, and they are tough. You know, this is battered. I don't know how old it is. It's been dragged around. The lens had broke and I stuck a bit of gaffer tape on there 2 years ago and it's still fine now. It's got a few scratches on the front, a few digs to the body, but they are bomb-proof. Never had a problem with it at all. Never any issues whatsoever. So there we are. I really hope this has been useful for you. I always like to try and present the yin and the yang of these things rather than saying something is absolutely perfect or not good at all. I would recommend this lens if you only had the budget for this lens, or you're just looking for one lens to use with a full frame Canon digital SLR. I think it's a good place to start, and I think you could probably, you know, supplement it with additional lenses further down the line. But as one lens to begin with, I think this was the kit lens. This was supplied with a lot of these cameras. There was a reason for that. And that focal length really is a joy because you can achieve so much with it. I hope you've enjoyed watching. Please do subscribe because I'm going to go through most of the lenses that I use, and I've got other series that I'm working on that I want to do, and so please do subscribe and like and comment. Give me your comments on these things because I'd love to hear if you're using the newer version of the 24-105, the Mark II, or the RF version. I was just using the RF version the other day, or if you've found an alternative, a Sigma or a Tamron or something that you think is arguably better. Let me know. I'd really appreciate your opinions actually. I have thought about buying the Mark II, and then I just kind of keep coming back to the fact that this does pretty much everything that I want it to do apart from that zoom creep. Ouch. There we are. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.